Thank you everybody for joining us. I'm Omar Bedawi. I'm the Director of Medical Device Safety at NEST Coordinating Center. And today I'm really excited about having some time to talk to you and field some questions around our active surveillance roadmap, which, as all of you know, we've published and put out for public review. We're really excited about hearing feedback on it to help guide and shape how we can make this as an effective a program as possible. I'll go into some background about NEST and also review key points of the roadmap and leave some time for Q&A and to hopefully help get everybody motivated to provide some great feedback to us. So first, I'm going to cover the motivation of the active surveillance program. Why are we doing this? What have we done to date? Talk about our proposed roadmap that we've published, specifically going into our priorities, vision, the role of federated learning that we'll be using, and the scope of signal detection activities. Then looking at how we're going to use real-world data and discuss how we can have participation from stakeholders and the community, as well as going into question and answers. So for those of you not too familiar with NEST, we're part of MDIC, Medical Device Innovation Consortium, and NEST's mission and vision, I want to focus real quick on the vision we have, which is really to have a world where people are empowered to make informed medical choices that enable patients to live their lives to the fullest extent possible. So we're really focused on getting medical device safety and information out to the public and all stakeholders so we can benefit the most from innovation within medical device community. If you look a little bit of our history, NEST was MDIC was awarded funding to initiate NEST back in 2016, so about 5 years ago. Back in 2019 is when the Active Surveillance Task Force was formed. And from then there was the IT Cloud Work Group, which started working on this phase 1 build, which is just completed. We're about to kick off our phase 2 implementation, and we expect next year to have a fully operational cloud and active surveillance program in operation. So now let me pause a bit and just go into the motivation for active surveillance. Back in 2018, the Medical Device Safety Action Plan charged NEST with developing, testing, operationalizing solutions to enable ongoing, prospective, active monitoring of post-market device for real-world data. Now, what does that mean? Basically, if we look at passive surveillance systems, which is really how most device safety is done today, those are important and really should not go away, but they have a lot of drawbacks. They're really based primarily on voluntary reporting, difficult to scale up, and do have a lot of challenges. So bringing active surveillance really helps advance our ability to detect new signals, to do that faster, more rapidly than we can do without such programs. We can do signal refinement, which is really where we understand what kind of safety signals we're seeing and do those studies more efficiently. We can get a much broader and diverse set of patients and data, so we can represent all populations, particularly those that are traditionally underrepresented today, and make sure that they're part of that research. Minimize surveillance bias with voluntary systems. And ultimately, we're going to improve patient safety. Ideally, what we want to be able to do is we want to have confidence when devices are safe and effective, that they can be used in populations and new populations and get those life-saving and important devices for quality of life into the public as soon as possible. And when there are adverse events that are being detected, we want to understand those as soon as possible prevent those from happening and prevent exposure to as many people as possible. So we're really doing all this in the name of patient safety. And having such a system will help us detect rare events as well. So when we look at our priorities, really this starts with having a very large and diverse data network. And the way we plan to approach this is by having no cost and very low barriers to participation. Very important, that next bullet point, no requirement to share data. We know this is a very challenging thing when you're dealing with patient data. And so we're not going to require any direct sharing of data with NEST or with other partners. And we want to bring value to those data and research partners. Also, we want to develop a secure, scalable platform with high data quality and reliability. In order to do this, we're going to have a common data model, but we're going to use a very flexible approach that accommodates the existing data structure of partners. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. Also, we intend to have a governance model that will help manage those collaborative activities of the network. So we expect to really have a good collaboration of this research network where we can drive more innovation off of each other. And the early priorities are going to be on signal refinement and hypothesis-driven signal detection or generation. So those will be really trying to be very pragmatic and attainable in the early phases where we're trying to not look for basically everything possible under the sun, have a little bit more focused approach looking at core endpoints such as death, rehospitalization, repeat procedures. But as we mature and evolve, we will get more and more into novel signal detection. So what was done in phase one? Briefly, there was a cloud system that was set up. If you look in the bottom right, the NEST cloud, and we worked with 2 data partners, major research groups at health systems, Leahy and Mercy, and basically worked to take de-identified data from those systems and move them into this central cloud and analyze using a analytical tool, Delta 3.7. And there were 2 major use cases. One was taking synthetic data, running analysis on it to see if we could detect a hidden signal. And another was to reproduce or reevaluate studies looking at comparing 2 types of drug-eluting cardiovascular stents and evaluate if this could be done effectively through this process. Both of those test cases were successful, and now we're moving on to the second phase. If I move on to where we're going with our current roadmap, it starts here with a federated cloud. Then we go into expanding the network and developing these signal detection studies, and then we'll have a full active surveillance program in effect, and I'll describe each of these pieces. And ultimately, we end up starting to enhance that system based off feedback and future needs. So for the federated cloud, first focusing on data management and curation, and I mentioned this earlier, but it's essential that data remains securely in the partner managed environment. We're not going to be asking for patient data to be transferred to our cloud. Those can stay within the data partners. We will have mechanisms to support implementation and adaptation of any common data model, and we want to ensure that there's good data provenance and lineage of how data was transferred over time, so we know the quality and reliability of data. And really the intention is to support multiple data structures from data partner perspective, so we reduce the effort to join the network. We know many of you have already joined research networks. You may have already established data warehouse using OMOP or another type of common data model. And we certainly don't want to add work onto that. So we will be accommodating those systems as they have. Now, moving into the federated learning side, for those of you not familiar with federated learning, it essentially allows for, if you look at the bullet point on the right, it's the bringing the model to the data rather than taking the data to the model. So we'll have in our central cloud, we can develop our models, our analysis, and then those tools and analyses can be distributed out through this federated learning environment to the partners and run across that data locally and iterated across to do the learning of the models and then brought back with the results into the central cloud. And so there's a lot of innovation in this space. Many of you may have seen there's been some high profile studies of this recently, even just in the past week. And in order to keep this innovation moving, we believe that we shouldn't be overly dependent on proprietary solutions and really leveraging a lot of the open source and innovation in data science that's happening today so we can scale and advance into the future. We'll continue to leverage Delta and that tool that's been developed as one of the suite of applications that will be used. And of course, we'll have a study orchestration system, which will allow for partners to opt in and out, as well as not just on a study level, but potentially also looking at data points and whatnot in terms of what data is available for the research. And lastly, as I said, for security, we maintain the data will all be maintained on your own environment. And we'll consider and are evaluating additional security and privacy features such as trusted execution environments, robust data encryption and distribution, and other solutions as they continue to become made available. Now, when we talk about a full active surveillance program, what do I mean by that? Really looking at having several partners with data in our common data model. We have this full federated system working. We have automated data curation, validation, quality checks. We have those study orchestration services running. We've got a rich program management process where we have the legal frameworks done. We have a framework for continuous improvement and validation of the system, and a governance structure for the collaborations that will leverage that entire network. Obviously, technical operations are going to be important, cybersecurity, IT management. We need people and processes for monitoring of data patterns and quality. So we need to be very proactive about understanding what data is coming from sites, looking for change in patterns that could introduce bias or problems with analyses, and then obviously monitoring those safety signals. When do we see things that are concerning that need to be escalated? And we'll have client relationship managers to help support all of this. So if we try to summarize what goes into phase 2, really it's upgrading this cloud, and I want to focus in on a couple of things. If you look here into this cloud, rather than having the de-identified data sent to our cloud, as you'll notice, there's no patient level data coming in from those data partners. This will have the data curation analytics packages that are done, and only summary statistics are sort of transferred back and forth. The one exception to that is there will be, we anticipate that the FDA will occasionally need, on exceptional circumstances, follow-up that may require getting into patient level data. And we are working on a path where that can be done directly through data partners with the FDA. So that way we know that there is the best security with that, and there's no extra sharing of data to anybody that's not needed beyond those public health authorities. To do all this, like we said, we are really focusing on having a broad research network. Today, NEST has a really tremendous research network covering over 160 million patients. There's even some new partners that aren't in here in this slide that have recently joined. And we would love for these partners to also participate in active surveillance as we modernize how we analyze and use data, but obviously are looking for more partners as well. In expanding that, we have a RFI that's going to be released very soon with active surveillance use cases. And we recognize that the biggest hurdle for joining Research Network is really going to be the initial implementation. We anticipate providing financial support for implementation of those projects, which means that the effort to participate in future projects and continuation should be minimal, because once we have a common data model set up and data is flowing, future projects should be fairly straightforward. We also want to add some value add features, which particularly as medical device safety initiative, we're augmenting UDI information, device characterization data, and we'll be providing that. And we also anticipate having a research network where we can collaborate across the community and leverage the data partners for investigator-initiated studies. Obviously, there are a lot of stakeholders to active surveillance, and so we are bringing a lot of value in this area, especially bringing patient representation, making sure they're always at the heart and focus of what we're doing. Domain experts, industry experts, public health officials, all, as well as others, are welcome and encouraged to represent and participate in our work groups and help shape where we're going, as well as obviously provide feedback on our roadmap and other calls that are posted publicly for public feedback. By putting all this together, we think we'll have very high value through cost-effective studies. This will be a very efficient program. We'll have a broad set of data partners, and we hope that we can even start looking at exploring how we can use this to fulfill some regulatory requirements and obviously integration of UDI, which currently is not as consistent and robust as we'd like. And of course, we also envision strategic partnerships. We can't do this alone. In fact, almost everything we're doing is based off a highly collaborative approach. And so by engaging with strategic partnerships, we can really improve the efficiency of the program overall, specifically with implementations and getting this off the ground. So in summary for this, really where active surveillance is bringing together diverse set of stakeholders so we can be proactive about finding safety signals and devices out in the real world, understand those as quickly as possible, and help improve safety and drive more innovation into medical device development. We're going to have a broad, diverse data set of partners so we can detect rare events that really is extremely challenging to do today, and get equitable representation of populations so we can really see how it affects people who are being exposed to these devices. And again, can't state this enough, low barrier, low risk to participation, and leveraging our strategic partnerships. So I went through that pretty quickly because I wanted to leave the last 10 minutes for questions. But I do want to point out that obviously this is in support of our roadmap, which is published. And if you go to this URL, and we strongly encourage you to take the questions, comments, feedback you have, and please post them on that on that open call, and the deadline for that is 5 o'clock Eastern on Monday, October 11th. So please make sure to provide your feedback by then. And as I noted earlier, we do have some other things coming up. Right now, there is an IT Cloud work group nominations available on our open calls. So looking for other experts to help support us in developing this architecture and framework. And we soon will be releasing an RFI, which will talk about how you can become a data partner and what our proposed initial studies will be based off of FDA priorities. So with that, I will wrap it up and take any questions that you have. I also have some of my colleagues here with me as well that can help answer questions. Okay, so I see a good question here. It says, you made note of data not being shared, but isn't that the goal of a network? Can you clarify? I would also like to understand what is made publicly available versus available only to partners. So that's a great question. So when I talk about data not being shared, this is really the heart of federated learning. And what that means is we would have data partners that have their data available. So imagine you have your EHR data in your data warehouse, and it's standardized into a common data model, such as OMOP. And there are several other health systems who have done the same thing. So they're all part of this network. What we would do is we could run a study where we're analyzing and looking for exposure to a certain device and looking for adverse events. And essentially that model is pushed out and run locally. Part of that model is run locally on that data that you have and you own in your own data warehouse. And then the results of that are then brought back and shared. So no patient level data is ever shared. It only takes the information derived from that and shares that back. So this basically becomes an extremely safe way of doing analyses. There's a lot of complexities that go in with that, but this is a very fast evolving area. It's been had many great developments. There was a paper study published in Nature just a few days ago using this approach that you may want to check out. But very, very compelling way to be able to do research without having to share data. Okay, so I see there is a couple other questions. Is there a role for product sponsors to play in building active surveillance and in active surveillance test cases? Absolutely. I think we see that as a viable role. We think this is going to have a lot of value for industry, that they may want to do prospective analyses, and we'll certainly have a path for that. There's also a question here about how will device manufacturers be notified if there's a signal detected for their product? Do they have to be a project sponsor? This is a great question. I would say that this is something that we expect to be formalized through our governance structure. There's no intention of this to be something where we're simply looking for problems with devices. I think this is all in the name of driving innovation, improving patient care, and that is only going to be effective if we really collaborate well with the industry sponsors as well as patients and public health officials. So I would not expect that anything in this process would come as a surprise to a medical device manufacturer where it's being studied without their knowledge, and or anything along those lines. I don't know if any of my colleagues, Anne, wants to jump in for any of them as I'm reading through.
Sure. Let's see. I'll take, can you share how the Delta toolkit mentioned in the roadmap can be accessed? So right now, the toolkits and such that are deployed within the Nest cloud are not accessible to outside parties unless that group or that set of researchers would join as a data partner and then would have access to the tools we have. But it is an open source analytic tool. So I think if you were to get in touch with the Leahy Health team, you could speak with them further.
Thanks. And so there's another question here. Interested in how you capture UDI from OR into patients and the community? Do these map seamlessly into one database, or are they stored in various databases and compiled? If so, how? So this is another great question. I think one of the big challenges and things being worked on at NEST is around UDI, and that will be central to our work with active surveillance. I think we anticipate that these will not have existing seamless processes for getting integrated. So I think that will be part of the onboarding and work, is to bring that data into the common data model, help provide structure to that, and provide a path. We are working and in discussions with other groups who have bringing metadata and other information for extracting characteristics of device information, extracting that from EHR and other data, standardizing to map to which device it actually is, and bringing along information about that. So there's a lot of work where we can bring device information into these research databases. We do see that as something we know will be a major focus for us, and has not been really solved by others yet. So that's something we hope to really lead the effort in that.
Okay, Omar, I'll take the one that says, can you explain the phase 2 testing that will occur? For example, fully disposable duodenoscopes. So as Omar mentioned, I believe we are building both a sandbox environment and then essentially our production environment, which will have the Nest Central Cloud connected to multiple data partner environments. So in terms of any one of these tests, one of the first things we would do is define who our data partners are that would have relevant data for the particular use case. They would be asked to opt in to participating in the active surveillance program. A lot of this that I'm describing will be done through technical means and communications through the system is planned. And then once we have a set of data partners who are established and on the system, Nest Cloud plans to make available data curation code and scripts so that the different data partners would have their data within their own local environments. We would then provide them with translation code to enable them to conform to a common data model, and that would be pre-established when they're implemented initially. We are looking likely at a FHIR common data model at this point. And so bringing it into that, then running data curation scripts to confirm interoperability and definitions on the different data fields. Once we have that, the Nest would also be providing a localized analytic that is deployed locally, and then results, or if it's a machine learning type model, model coefficients or results would be shared back to the Nest Cloud. So at a high level, that's how a test would occur. And then, of course, data would need to be refreshed and ongoing surveillance considered as well.
Thanks. And I know we're over time. I'll answer one more question here. Will NEST data be fed to the FDA directly, as with adverse events reports that go to MAUDE that are publicly viewable? The TAVR registry submitted to MAUDE, but most others haven't. So at this point, data will not be fed directly to the FDA as part of routine process. This will be something that we'll be doing in partnership with them, but there won't be an automated process of sending data directly to them. As I mentioned earlier, we intend to have a lot of discussions establishing our governance model and how these will be implemented, and would love feedback as well, if you'd like to provide it, on how we can make these systems integrated. We have heard and agree that if we can leverage this system to minimize the amount of other reporting that's needed, that seems like it would be a win for a lot of groups. And so that's something we're definitely looking at, but not something that's committed to in this next phase. So sorry, I know there were quite a few other questions we didn't have a chance to get to, but really appreciate the enthusiasm and feedback. Please provide your comments onto the roadmap and follow up with us. We really look forward to working with you and helping to make this as valuable a system as possible. Thank you.